This recording is going to be a guided kind of tour of the study questions that we're working with in class on Out of Africa. I divided up the study questions into 4 different kinds of sections. The sections themselves reflect in part certain parts of the film, and then as well the overall film and how I would like you to think about understanding it. So I want us first to think about where Karen comes from, the way that the film opens, the montage that shifts us back to Denmark. And I want us to think about her life as a woman during the early 20th century. What's most important for us to understand is that the study question itself asks you to think about a question of being lost, which I think would have been very real for women during this period of time. Her identity is exclusively based on her relationships. When she finds out that Bror's brother has cheated on her, she accepts Bror's proposal and basically gives him her fortune so that she can go to Africa and get the title of the Baroness or Baronessa. Is she trapped? Probably not. But she definitely feels somewhat in shock and set back by Bror's brother's infidelity, which of course, as we know through the course of the film itself, is, I guess, maybe shared as a family value. We'll hopefully be able to talk about that in class. She agrees to marry Bror and go to Kenya for what I feel would be obvious reasons. And as we animated in our seminars, our class time, it's difficult for us to understand colonialism. But for young people, or in this case, young adults, during this period of time, the auspice of empire and everything it could offer would reflect the kinds of freedoms that, in this case, our characters could not achieve due to the social convention of pre-World War I Europe. I think she agrees to marry Bror. I don't think it's for the title. I think it's for, one, she doesn't want to be alone. I think that's clear early in the film. Or because of the patriarchal forces of society of the time, she can't understand herself as autonomous or alone. And the excitement of Kenya, which of course, once the camera moves to the opening panorama of the train ride, we kind of get it, right? And the musical score really invites us to come in with this momentous journey and the excitement that this character must feel. Karen's first response is to Africa. I asked you to make impressions from roughly the first 40 minutes of the film. These are really important in the way that we're going to look at the question of colonialism, which we're going to debate, I hope. Hopefully we've already started to debate it. And I want you to think about her whiteness in the first 40 minutes and the way she really reflects empire. It doesn't take her long to begin shifting, but make a list of your first impressions of the way she understands Africa on the early screening of the movie. Karen's marriage, what's the central problem in it? Is it really Bror's infidelity? I mean, many marriages survive with sexual promiscuity. We see it in literature, we see it in film, we certainly see it with our friends. It's a very personal choice. I don't think I'd be thrilled with it as a random side note, but I don't know what happens if you do fall in love with someone who doesn't want to be pinned down. But Bror's infidelity, which is the central problem that leads to a really big problem, is only part of the incompatibility of these characters. They live separate lives. He doesn't integrate her into Kenyan life. She has no choice but to do that on her own, which is great, right? Which begins her journey towards being autonomous. But they never really connect on a deep level. It's obvious that they've had sex because Bror gives her syphilis, which I think is her wake-up call. When And I guess we'll look at this in question 4. I'm getting ahead of myself. Karen's difference to the other colonial characters in the film is that she instantly understands the divide between black and white, and that it involves territory and land and livelihood. And very early on in the film, despite her own white privilege, she certainly attempts to empathize and problem solve for the Kikuyu. And you'll remember Dennis challenges her on this. So we'll certainly look at that in class. Karen's illness in roughly the first third of the film functions as a denouement that allows her character to emerge differently. She's, I mean, syphilis, right? She is threatened with her life. And as she leaves, she realizes that the arsenic, which was used as a cure at the time, would have some kind of side effect, or could. And she says as she leaves, I knew I would return one day, mad or sane. So even in her anticipated madness as a side effect from the treatment, thank goodness this didn't happen, she feels that she would most definitely return to Africa. At this point, she's met Dennis. At this point, she's connected with the African landscape. At this point, she's integrated into expat society. But what do you feel is the impetus for the line I just recited? And I would suggest rather strongly that she most definitely returns to Africa, to Kenya, as a very, very different woman. And you'll notice that in your study questions, I use the word woman, not character, person. She has no choice but to evolve past being who she was. From there, she has no trouble continuing her connection with Dennis. Their connection is based on friendship and storytelling. I love this scene where Karen takes over the story, right? When Dennis comes over for dinner, and it's platonic at this point, and they really, really connect on a deep-seated level. They really enjoy each other's company. And Dennis falls in love with her, not just because she's feisty, independent, most certainly for the time, and rather beautiful, especially in the way that the film characterizes her. But he falls in love with her because of her ability to tell stories. The message of desire here is rather beautiful, I think, that sure, we can have boyfriends and girlfriends and lovers and whatnot, but our very deep and beautiful connections come from the people with whom we share a friendship, sort of as the foundation of our love for them. I feel this is what makes their relationship work. I feel that the film idealizes idealizes their romance, and this is done through the pastoral, the panorama, the setting of Africa, especially to those of us who are white or identify as non-African, for lack of better descriptors. Africa becomes this place we just want to go to in the same ways that Dennis and Karen were there. Africa changes over the first few years Karen lives there. And the film wants us to understand that the changes are important for us to look at. One, we have the colonial project, and the changes would need to come from adjusting this project, from changing the project itself, and from basically making Africa more hospitable to its natives. We see this through the Kikuyu and as well through the Maasai. How the film wants us to understand these changes through imagery and through the actual images and related editing that are revealed to the viewer. Karen and Dennis have this incredible safari getaway. The trip into the bush really reflects, and this is right, it reflects almost a twofold understanding of their relationship. They become, they are colonialists at this point, right? They're on a safari. They're supported by Africans for their enjoyment. Karen's china is packed, probably not her Limoges, but some kind of china and cutlery and glasses, as thank goodness they didn't have plastic back then, are packed for them. And Karen and Dennis have this beautifully romantic dinner in their safari getaway. The lion scene, as I might have in your reading module, I hope I included it. If not, I can add it in. Actually, had to be reshot because the lion that was being used wasn't responding enough. In other words, it didn't it didn't appear as a big enough threat. And I don't know what they did to the poor animal, but it did go to attack. And Meryl Streep's character did get it back with the bullwhip. She was actually defending herself, and supposedly she was rather traumatized for a long time from this experience. The trip into the bush connects Karen and Dennis with the African pastoral end at night. Outcasts from European society, incredible human beings. Both of them understand the colonial project and respond to it. Their love is made very clear to us when they go into the wild. You'll remember the scene where Dennis saves Karen earlier on, and he really reads her the riot act and explains to her that her rifle on her horse isn't the best thing to have. As well, Karen shows us her naivete. Her horse instantly starts to respond. I'm a rider. When my horse stops and I'm out in the woods and he's looking at something, I know he's seen something I do not see. So if he was responding the way that Karen's horse was responding, it would mean there would be a predator in the area, right? Horses are flight animals. So even my big crazy horse would probably kick a coyote in the head and do a very good job with it, I might add, would initially respond the way Karen's horse does. She doesn't pay attention. She's engulfed in the pastoral, and Dennis saves her pre-safari, of course. So there's a little denouement from my response to the safari question. Conflicts within this film, we really have a lot. But if we place the film under the umbrella of our course, desire in literature and film, I feel that the conflict is the ability of the characters to connect on equal terms. A discourse exists within this film, articulated through the climax rather intensely, if not before. And we realize that Karen and Dennis, as part of the African landscape itself, discuss what could or what could not make their relationship work, and their conflict is based on their understandings of marriage and their conflicting understandings of marriage. I suggest the climax is the beach scene where Karen is rather stubborn that she doesn't understand Dennis, and possibly to us we might see her as not being reasonable, but don't forget the time frame of the film. So Dennis is being very avant-garde. Karen wants a happy marriage. Dennis could give it to her. The resolution is really a hard, jagged little pill, as the cliche goes, to swallow. Karen must make peace with Dennis's understanding of marriage only once he's dead. And the burial sequence, which is heart-wrenching, right? The burial sequence shows us that she will bury him with integrity and love. And it's a very difficult scene. Eventually, Karen leaves, and the outro of the film lets us know that the resolution that the film, unlike a memoir, right, that the resolution of the film, so the film is different from our memoir, is integral to her understanding of herself. And as she parts with Farah, a friendship I adore in this film, it shows us how important friends are. Farah asks, he asks her, you know, can I come with you? And she says, you know, you really wouldn't like it. And as the film ends, you know, we have a panorama where Dennis is buried. Karen says, I received a letter from a friend in Africa, and he's let me know that lions have been seen on Fichhaden's grave. She's still connected to Dennis for good reason, and where they chose to bury him. She understands the lions, who in many ways are connected to the representation of Dennis in this film rendition of Dennis Fichhaden's life. And Karen's voiceover lets us know that the lions are there to oversee the savannah and to have a look at the game. In other words, to figure out their hunting grounds and their related strategies, all instinctual. Main ideas for the film: if you're having trouble, you can go back to my previous recordings, recorded lectures that look at themes and main ideas, and make sure you frame them with the methodology we use in the class. Remember, your research paper will come from this film, so you may find that this is a really important question, and we're going to spend a lot of time on it rather, and if you're having trouble, I of course will help you. So thank you very much for listening to these guided responses. Between this and what we do in class, your study questions should be solidified. If you need anything else from me, you're going to communicate with me and let me know. And of course, I will make sure that you have it, as our research paper, our term paper, comes from this beautiful film, this beautiful, well done film. Thank you. See you in class.